So if you're using Mac, it's going to be Bash. If you're using Windows, in my case, I'm using PowerShell. But once you go through the process, you're going to be able to just type in Git, and this will just confirm that Git is installed on your machine and it's correct, right? Like I can do things like if I were to go to a repo, which I have made in here, this is a project that I created previously, and it is in Git, so I can check a status, I can look at different logs, and you can look at basically your commit history and what's happening in there. So for this project, we're going to create basically a brand new project. So we know that we're going to need Git. You're going to need to get it installed on your computer. It'll get added to the environment variables on your path. And then that's why you can do things like this. Once you get that up and running, I would head over to basically Unity. And if you go to Unity, let me just pull this right here. And you can say Unity Hub download. And Unity Hub, it's basically what I'm showing you right here. It's like a central location where you can download different versions of Unity. And you can also basically add the modules. You can look at, if I go into Learn, they also have a learning hub that allows you to look at different projects that Unity creates and then different resources. So what I would do for your Unity Hub, just head over to unity.com, download, and then I would start by downloading it for the operating system that you have. In my case, I'm using Windows 11 right now, but if you're using Mac OS, then they also have a version for Mac OS. So you'll also need to create an account for Unity before you can set up Unity Hub completely. I already have an account set up, so basically, once you do that, you're going to get Unity Hub, and then you can log in and see your account information in here. All right, so once you have it set up, I recommend using, for this session, we're going to be using Unity 6.2. And the reason for that is because 6.2 introduces you to a new building profile specifically for MetaQuest. It used to be that we will basically recommend developers to use Android as a build profile, which is fine. You can still use it, but with 6.2, you have the MetaQuest one, which has compiler, basically a designated compiler. It has the appropriate Android version, the different texture information, the compression that is required to be able to build to your MetaQuest device. All right, so we're going to start here, and then once you get landing here, just click on Install Editor. And I recommend using, like I said, 6.2. I already installed it, so just go ahead and install the latest version. Once you install it, it's going to give you an option to, if I were to just click on this right here, let's say that this was the version that I needed to install, right? Then make sure that you enable Android build support, and then OpenJDK, and then the Android SDK and NDK tools. Because Horizon OS is pretty much running behind Android, so we're going to be using Android build support to package your APK and then to deploy your APK to your MetaQuest 2, 3, or 3S. Anything else in here, like if you want to add documentation, language packs, and if you're supporting a different type of platform, then, if you're an XR developer, you might be looking into Vision OS. And if you're doing maybe Linux development, you may also have that support. But in this case, we're just going to be using that. And then just click on Continue and then install it. I'm not going to go through that process because that takes a while. I already have it installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new project. And let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so once you install it, this is the new Unity Hub. It gives you the option here to select. In some computers, I have a bunch of different versions. In this case, I only have these two. But it's cool because you can go in here and say, well, I want to create a project with this version. Let's say that you're working on a different project. You can have one project in one version and then another project in a different version. So in this case, I'm going to do that. And then we're going to be selecting Universal 3D. This is what we recommend. You can still use the standard rendering pipeline, but a lot of our features and samples are now using Universal 3D. So that's where we recommend to use that rendering pipeline. And then for the project name, I would go back into, let's see, if we go back into my repo here, just go ahead and close that. And we go back into this name. I'm going to go ahead and match this name so that we have a folder that matches that Git repo. So I'm going to go ahead and just name that, and then just select the location. I put everything under code. That way I know where everything is. So in my case, if I go to my code folder, these are all my different Unity projects. So, and then we're going to be using Git behind the scenes. I'm not going to use the built-in source control for Unity, and then just click on create project. So it's going to take a little while, and while that happens, then we're going to be adding a file that is going to be very important. So if I go into this directory here, I'm going to pull the actual git ignore that we're going to need for this. Okay, so what is a git ignore? And the reason why we're going to need that is because there are temporary files that we're going to be checking into source control that I wouldn't want to check in anything that is temporary. So in this case, like any library files, temporary directories, we're going to be ignoring. If you guys are using Blender for 3D modeling, then everything here is going to be ignored. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy, and this is the link to be able to access that. I'll drop in those after the call too, so that you have that available as well. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And then if we go back into our terminal, now if I go back in here, you're going to see that I have my learning VR development. So let's go ahead and head over to that. And what I'm going to do is you can use any type of editor that you like. In my case, I'm going to be using code. So I'm going to say, I want to create a git ignore file in the root of that directory. And if I just go ahead and paste that, just going to go ahead and save it. And then we can just go ahead and close it out. So now if I do an ls, you can see that I have my git ignore. There's a temporary directory that Unity is creating. In fact, if I were to do code and then that, so opens code with all the different files, there are files in here that we wouldn't need, right? Like we don't need that. We don't need project settings. Let's say that you have another developer working on it and they like a specific layout. You may not want to get that layout. Logs, library, these are all things that get built at runtime. So you don't really need some of those. So we're going to be ignoring those. And then you can look at it in here as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back and then look at okay, so this is still getting created. So what I'm going to do is, now that we have a repo and it's getting created, I'll have to wait for the actual files to get in. So what we're going to do is we're going to say git init, and that's going to initialize these. It's going to add a git folder, and that way it's going to initialize the repo. And then if I do get a status, you're going to see that now we're going to start to see. So since this is still running, there's going to be files that are still going to be generated. But what I'm going to do is you're going to start and do git add. We're going to be adding all the files to the commit that we're going to be creating. And then I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to say it's going to be initial project files for my first VR game. And then it's going to add everything to your commit. So now if we look in here, this is going to tell you exactly what I'm telling you right now. We're going to create a new commit. And this is already named, if I go git branch, this already creates a branch called master. I think what GitHub does is sometimes some people call it main, or the system might call it main. This is just going to rename that to make sure that it's master. And then this is going to tell Git, creating an origin means that whatever pushes that you do, they're going to be pushed to a specific location. In this case, the origin is going to be that location. So we're going to go ahead and paste that. And then all you have to do is just do a git push. This is going to set the actual default upstring to be origin master, which is going to be that location. And you don't need to remember all this. You can just copy that information. And you can see that right now I don't have access to do that, right? So I'm going to create a new tab. And this is when authentication comes in handy. We're going to be using something called SSH and then keygen. And this is available for macOS and Windows as well. So if I hit enter, it's going to tell me, do I want to create a public and private SSH key? So I'm going to say, yeah, just go ahead and give it that name. I don't need a passphrase in this case. I'm just going to do that by default. So now what we can do though is I can go to that directory. And then I'm going to say, you know what, I want to go to the SSH directory. Go ahead and go back here. And then I want to pull the public key that I just created. So I'm going to say SSH. And then you're going to see that this is going to give you a pop extension. So just go ahead and go to that. And the way that SSH works, there's always a private key and a public key. So you don't want to give your private key, otherwise you'll get hacked. So we want to get that public key. And then if we go here, I'll just go ahead and open a new GitHub tab. And then if we go to settings, and then if I go to SSH, you're going to see that it shows you SSH and GPG keys. I'm going to create a new SSH, and I'm going to say this is my Devpost demo pop key. You can name it anything you like, and then we can just paste our key there. And then now we can just add our SSH key. And now my computer can communicate with GitHub securely. I have a private key. There's going to be a handshake, and that handshake means that it's kind of like a password type of thing. It keeps things secure. So now if I were to, I think there were other changes because the project just got created. So I'm just going to say add all the changes and then updates to the project. Probably want to do something more meaningful, but for now, for a demo, this is fine. And then you can just push your changes. And we're going to do basically the same command here that I have. We're going to set our upstream. And then looks like everything got pushed. So now if we go back to my project, now I have the project created. And I recommend just like creating a README file if you want to do that by default. And then that way you can keep track of any documentations or things like that that you want to share with your peers. I actually have a couple links that I'm going to include in this because you guys are going to be able to access this after. And then if you look at the README file, I'm going to have resources in there, and then competition links, programs, and then documentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a commit and commit it directly to the master, and that's fine. So when you guys are working with other developers, then you can start checking for changes, do a git pull, and now I got the changes locally as well. All right, so that's kind of a summary on source control. That I could do an entire section on that, but that should get us the project ready. So now let's start with some of the mixed reality components that we're gonna need for this project. So this is Unity, and once you basically open it up with URP, it's going to give you an URP empty template with tutorials and things like that. I normally just remove these because I don't want to submit that as part of the competition. In this case, you want to keep your project pretty lean. So the next thing that we're going to do is by default, we're going to have a sample scene and also a main camera, directional light, global volume. We don't need a global volume because we're not going to be adding post-processing effects to this scene. Then let's just wait here, and then we can just go ahead and remove that. I'm going to go ahead and rename this, and we can just say this is our Hello World VR. And then so if I double click on this and then hit F, you can see that we have a standalone application now, right? This is just a main camera. It's positioned at 1 and -10. And let me undo that. And then we have a light as well. So if we go into your game view, there's really nothing in there that we have. So now what I recommend you guys to do, if you look in here, we have this asset store option, and you can go into, if you already have done development with VR and you already added Meta SDKs, you can simply just click in here. And then if you already checked those different assets out in the asset store and add them to your car, they're free. Then you'll be able to just type in Meta, and you're going to see that we have, in my case, I have all these assets already because I've been doing this for a while. But if you don't, then we'll go back to this. You have to go into the asset store. Yeah, so once you go to the asset store, this is where we provide you, and we recommend that you go to get our packages from Meta. We also have UPN that you can access as a direct link, but we recommend you to go this way. The way to pull all the different assets for Meta is you can search for Meta, and then I would click on Meta as well. And when you do that, you're going to see that we have all these different assets. Well, these are packages. We have Meta XR all-in-one SDK, which is basically you get all the different SDKs, including voice, audio, Meta XR simulator. You also get the MRUK, which allows you to create mixed reality experiences and get information about your scene. Which includes this one, also Interaction SDK for more advanced hands and controller interaction. So there's a lot of stuff packed in here. We're going to use this for now just to keep it simple. But you could, if you wanted to keep it lean, you could start by just adding like core SDK. And then once you add the core SDK, then you can start adding things on top of it. So for now, let's just keep it simple. Just, go to the asset, add it to your assets. Once you have it added to your assets, which you'll see in here that it authenticated me, now I can open it in Unity. Then you can search it by going to my assets, which is what I just showed you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that you already did that. And then now if I go to my assets, we can start seeing, okay, well, all the different assets for Meta, I can just search in here. And the one that I'm going to be installing for simplicity's sake is we're going to be installing Meta XR Only One SDK. Version 81 is the one that is available right now. I also recommend developers to go into the history just in case. For some reason, sometimes it doesn't show the latest version, so you have to click on version history and then see latest, and it'll show you the latest. In this case, this is working just fine. It also shows you all the different dependencies. So these are all the different packages that this includes, which is handy. For instance, like if you wanted to add, so if you didn't want to add all that, you could say, well, I just want to add XR Core, which gives you like controllers, hands, camera, rig, some of the main core components. And then you can go ahead and add additional ones. For instance, like this one has dependencies on core. So if you were to just add this one, you're going to get MRUK, and you also will get core. Okay, so let's go ahead and install this one, and then just click on install. And as it installs, you're gonna see, if we go back to the documentation here on our repo, the part that I wanted to walk you through, and this is something that you can do on your own, but I recommend going into our competition website, which is Star Developer Competition, that Devpost resources. I'm not going to go through the process of enabling developer mode, but I recommend you to click on this to get started. This is going to tell you what you need to do, which in summary, you're going to be pairing your headset to your mobile phone. And then there's going to be an option under headset settings that allow you to enable developer mode on your Quest. This is very important if you want to deploy to your Quest. Otherwise, you won't be able to deploy to your Quest device, or even use something that is called MetaLink, which allows you to run basically Unity. You can hit play and see the changes right from the device. So I recommend you to basically look at that. There's other documentation in here as well for different assets that we're going to be using today, like MetaQuest Developer Hub Guide. Here's a download link, and that's going to be this right here, which we're going to be going through as well. So look at that. The packages are installing still, so I'll talk a little bit about this. So what is MetaQuest Developer Hub? So this is going to be a tool that allows you to basically look at different information about your headset. You can look at if the controller is connected, if your headset, what the battery is. You can also enable different analytics. So if you want to see how your game is performing, you can also use this to look at the profiler. And then we're going to be casting to the device, so this is going to be pretty handy to look at what I'm seeing on the device once we create that experience. And then there's also other options in here for disabling the boundary, proximity sensor. One thing that I use this a lot for, it's for logs. You can use Unity logs, but this also gives you logs on the headset. You can also use something called logcap, which essentially is going to get you this information. But this is cool because you can, as you're running the application, you can look at different issues. So I don't have a Unity app running right now, so it's not going to show me that, but you can filter on errors, debug logs, and regex if you want to create regex by yourself. And then other things in here, I think this is good to go. I'll go through the additional options in here in just a minute. So look at this website. There's a lot of information in here on all the different building paths and resources, also different workshops that we're going to be running throughout the competition. But it looks like we're good to go here. Okay, so let's go back. And then I think everything is installed. All right, so once it finishes, you're going to see, I'm just going to go ahead and pull this welcome screen. This is a really cool welcome screen that we just released as of version 81. And just from context, when I started developing, it was pretty bad. Like you had to copy and paste a lot of files from Oculus integration. So now everything it's It's pretty robust. We have building blocks. We have these welcome screens that will walk you through the process of setting up your project. So what I'm going to say here is if you are a new XR developer, just select that. Otherwise, you can say that you have some experience. I'm going to say that we're going to assume that we're all new to XR. And then this is really cool. The project setup tool, in the past, you used to have to go through every single setting. So if I go to File, Build Profiles, Player Settings, there are, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of settings in here that you have to enable for a standalone application, for a Quest application, what the graphic API is, what the compression of the texture is. There's just a lot of settings that I used to create videos just to people to understand everything that needed to be set up. So we don't need to do that anymore. You can still do it if you want some more refinement, but you don't need to do that because we have that project setup tool to basically get things going. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and go into the project setup tool, and this is the first thing that is you're going to be using this throughout your project creation. If you add new features, new building blocks such as Passthrough, hence this is going to guide you as far as like what settings you need to set. So if I look in here, I know that in our case we're going to be using OpenXR. So I know that I need to install this. So this is good. It tells you here that we need to install the Community XR Management. We need to enable the OpenXR plugin. We need to make sure that we have the right graphics API. It's telling us that for standalone, we need that, which is Directory 11. Then there's also, for textures, different options, stereo rendering, and so on. If you go in here, it's also going to tell you, which is really cool, it tells you what version of Android API you're going to need. I used to have to remember all these things. But what we're going to do is just keep that on hold. The first thing that I'm going to do is install the plugin management. So what is the XR plugin management? So as Meta, we provide different plugins. There's an Oculus plugin, which is now deprecated. And then we also have an OpenXR plugin, which is it's what we're telling developers to use from now on. And then other vendors also have their own plugins, right? There's different companies and they provide their own plugins. So Unity provides this architecture for people to have kind of a standard way of enabling different plugins to interact with different platforms. So like Google has one, and it's called Google AR Core. Okay, so for us, we're going to need OpenXR. So I'm going to go ahead and enable OpenXR. And then we'll do the same thing on Windows, but you're like, Dilmer, but why do we need to do that on Windows? We're not going to be doing any standalone development. Well, the reason for that is because we want to be able to hit play here. Unity is running on my Windows machine. So when I click on play, I want to be able to run the VR application on my headset. And the way that works is it's going to run through the standalone. It's going to connect to something called MetaLink. And MetaLink is going to say, okay, I'm going to be communicating with the headset via USB-C. And then I'm going to be launching the application that is running in Unity. It'll make more sense as I'm basically showing you how it works. And then I'm also going to go ahead and enable Meta XR feature group. And then if we go in here, I'll just do the exact same thing, Meta XR feature group. And once you do that, we're going to go into OpenXR. And I'm just showing you some of the things. These are things that the project setup tool can fix for you. But this gives you the options for OpenXR, right? And then you can also look and see OpenXR for standalone. It already has the XR features that we need for us to run this application on an Android. So what I'm going to do, just to keep things simple, notice that we don't have an interaction profile. And this is a way of OpenXR making sense of how to communicate with the headset and with the controllers by using the OpenXR standards. The same thing in here. So what I'll do here, I'll go back and I'm going to say, you know what, I trust all of these. I already review everything. I'm going to go ahead and click on Fix All. I'm also going to be, I'm good with this. I'm going to go ahead and apply everything. Just if you don't agree with this, maybe you're a graphics engineer and you're like, well, you know what, I don't want this rule. I don't want to apply it. You can always ignore it, which is really cool. You can also look at the rule source code just to see what it's doing. But in my case, I think everything else looks good there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Just go ahead and fix everything. And then if I go back, okay, so now for those of you who are going to be submitting an application to the STAR competition, I really recommend you to go through this two different options. You're going to have to do a data use checkup before you push your build, your APK to the Meta Horizon store, to one of the release channels. Otherwise, it's not going to pass. So I really recommend you to do that. For now, just read the information on these two, how to set up. For now, I'm just going to assume that I fix it just for simplicity of this tutorial. And then I'll do the same thing in here. That way we don't have everything pending. So looks like we're green there. So we're good to go. We can start developing, right? Okay, so now if I go back, now we have everything here. Everything is fixed, is green. So now these are tools that are really, really helpful. The Meta XR simulator, it does what it says. You don't need a headset to be able to test what we're going to be creating. We can use XR, we call it XR Sim for simplicity. And then we have Immersive Debugger, which is, think of Immersive Debugger as a log, as an inspector that is running a runtime. So if you look at the hierarchy here, and I look at an object, and I look at all the options, what Immersive Debugger is going to do is going to basically run reflection and then expose the properties, the fields, the objects to a runtime window. And it has a log, and there's just a lot of options in there that are really helpful to see as a developer without having to build every single time to a device. So I'll show you that as well. And then, so this is disabled. We're not going to enable it just yet. The one that I'm going to enable is going to be Meta XR Simulator. So it looks like that's good to go. You can also click here, open, and look at the Immersive Debugger options. If you want to enable it, we can click in here, and we'll see if we have time to do that. But this is where you can enable it, and it'll show up when you run your application on the headset. And then next, I think we're good. So documentation, samples. If you're building an application and you want to know, this is a really cool one, Unity North Star. I recommend looking at. It shows you a lot of how to use or different SDKs, and it's a full game that is also available in the store. And then mixed reality, MR motive. So recommend you to look at those samples. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Then let's go ahead and click next, and then so now, okay, cool. We got the project ready, but we cannot do anything just yet, right? We need to start adding more features. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into building blocks. And let's see, I think just make sure that I'm good at time. Okay, so it looks like we're good in time. Okay, so when you open building blocks, we have, these are ways, think of it if you're a Unity developer, prefabs, right? If you're a Unity developer and you have a large project, and let's say that your team created a UI component that you want to reuse throughout your game, and that's a prefab, and you can drag and drop. So think about every single one of these as being prefabs, that's what they are. But we have this UI on top of it that allows you to select what you need depending on what you want to build. So if you want to create an immersive experience, which means that you want to create a VR application, then these are the recommended building blocks, and they are grouped by that area. If you want to create mixed reality, meaning that I want to see the real world, I want to know where the tables are, and I want to place my game characters depending on the different areas that are detected, right? So there are different building blocks in here, such as pass-through, occlusion, and so on. We also have tabletop games, and then if you want to look at all of them, then you can look at all of them. Let's say that we want to build a VR experience. I'm just going to go ahead and click in here. So now, if you haven't done VR development before, you're like, okay, Dilmer, what is a camera rig? And I'm not going to answer that. What I'm going to have you do is just click on it, and you're going to see that this tells you exactly what it is. It's going to give you the ability to basically track the headset, body movements in a virtual experience. It's a camera that has 6 degrees of freedom. So if you move your head and you look around, you're going to see that, objects that are in your surrounding, depending on your rotation and also your movement. Another cool thing I mentioned, these are prefabs, right? So if I were to, if you want to click on this prefab, you can see that these are basically what this tool is doing. If I were to add it to the scene, it has them all organized. So I can see that this is the OVR camera rig. These are the different scripts that are associated with that. So, but I'm not going to drag and drop this. I mean, you could, but I don't recommend that. I recommend to use the UI to do that. So you can drag and drop if you wanted to, or you can just click on this plus symbol. So once you click on that plus symbol, and we can close out of this for now, you're going to see that now we have this building block, and they are designated there's always going to be a brackets building block, and that tells you that that was added. We get a lot of questions about, Dilmer, can you extend building blocks? If you're a hardcore developer, you want to create things from scratch. And my answer is always just depends on where you are in your development process. If you want to prototype something quickly, I recommend using building blocks and having another project that you can use, or another scene that you can use as a reference, just to see what's added, right? Like what is required. And then if you want to create your own implementation, then you know what scripts you can leverage and what settings. So this shows you also if you go to the inspector and select that, you can see that this building block doesn't have any dependencies. And then if this was used by another thing, it'll tell you here what it's used by. And then the thing that is important for these building blocks specifically is if you go down, you're gonna see that there are different settings already assigned. If you were to add this script manually, there's a lot of settings in here that won't be set automatically for you. But in this case, this is already setting that this experience is gonna be controllers only. We haven't really added hand tracking just yet, but everything that we add from building blocks is going to be populating some of these Quest features, depending on what you add. So if you wanted to create a mixed reality experience, and you were to add the pass-through building block, this is going to be changed to support it. I think it's either supported or required, but it'll change depending on that. The same thing with mixed reality utility kit, scene support will be added, and then some of the other settings depending on what you do. See, like enable pass-through is not enabled because we haven't really added those building blocks just yet. Okay, so you're like, okay, cool, Dilmer, so what do we do now? So another cool thing about this is if you look at the main camera, we have two cameras, right? Like if I expand this and I look at tracking space, and you look at the center eye anchor, we have a camera already assigned here. We also have a camera on the left and right eye. In this case, it's going to be the one that is assigned, is enabled by default. And then we also have left hands for controllers, and then right controller. It is getting track, controllers are track. And also if I go in here to your camera rig, this information, this is already being tracked. Actually, if I go to center eye anchor, you're gonna see here that the camera that is getting used is selected. If I go to this main camera, it's gonna be deselected. And that's because this main camera is no longer needed. It's only used for standalone. So now, how do I test it, right? Let me go ahead and I'm just gonna create let's actually go down to my Meta XR Interaction SDK Essentials. And if you go on the runtime, go to samples, and you can pull in any type of objects. If you want to pull things from the objects from the asset store or from a Sketchfab, you can do that. In my case, I'm going to leverage our packages, and then you can click on packages and then props. And in here, we can just go ahead and pull an object. I think I wanted to pull, there's a ping pong. I think I wanted to pull just a guitar. Okay, just gonna go ahead and pull that and add it to our scene. And when you're developing in VR, you gotta be careful with the distances, right? Because now we're dealing with meters, and this is 5 meters away from the camera, and it's offset as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and place it, maybe I'll just place it as 0, 1 meter away from the floor, and then maybe I'll just place it right about 0.5. And then the other thing that I'll also do, I think the camera is already set correctly at the origin. And then you can see that we're using floor level. So this is going to take into account the floor level calculation that the operating system has, depending on where, like if I put the device right now, it's going to calculate where the floor is. You can also change that when you're doing your boundaries, your boundary setup, but that's going to get that information. You can also use eye level, stage, or stationary. That depends on the experience that you're building. So another thing that I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. I'll just go ahead and rotate it 90 on X, and then I want to just make sure that it's facing me. So now if I go to the game view, and go ahead and make sure that I can see that. And I think I cannot see it because the camera is on the very bottom. But what I'll do here, just to show you, if I go here, so once we load this on the simulator, you'll see that the floor is going to be calculated correctly. So how do I do that, right? So we have this button right here, and we already enable it by using the welcome screen. But if you didn't do that, you can always use this. And if you hover over it, it's gonna say, it's gonna enable that Meta XR SIM once you click on it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and click on it. And this is simple right now, but it's gonna show you that we have a camera rig, we have a 3D object on the scene. So now I wanna know, okay, are things rendering correctly? Is this object gonna show up on the actual device? Well, you don't need to deploy to be able to test that, right? Normally we do, but that takes time. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And what I'm doing is I'm using my mouse and I'm holding the right mouse click, and that way it allows me to look around. The other thing that is important here to know is, let me just make this a little bit bigger, is this simulator allows you to look at what's happening in terms of input. So right now I have the headset input selected, I have the left controller's input selected, and then I have the right controller selected. So if I were to use WASD on my keyboard, you can see that I can navigate around it. If I want to go down, and let me go ahead and basically expand this right here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and expand the headset controller and also the right controller, and you're going to see that we have position, orientation. If you wanted to see the velocity, and if we had gravity in these objects, you can see the linear velocity and also the angular velocity. But as I'm moving around, you can see that I can also see those changes in real time. Another thing that is really cool though is I can change the movement speed. So I'm gonna go ahead and maybe I have a game where I need to go, I don't know, to distances, big distances. Now I can actually change the speed of the rig, and then I can move around. And I'm gonna go ahead and set it back. I can also toggle these ones if I only want. I don't have controllers added just yet. We're gonna add them in a minute. But you can also toggle and say, I just want to move the headset, I just want to move the controller on the left or the right. And another thing that is also cool, let me move this a little bit, is I can also look at both eyes, right? Where we have multiple cameras on the Quest devices. So this allows you to look at, if you want to look at the left eye, if you want to look at the right eye, if you want to look at both, then that kind of gives you an idea of, depending where you have the objects in the scene, how they're going to look like based on the camera that you have selected. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in here. And another thing that is very useful from here is if I go and expand input controls, you can also look at bindings, right? And if I go and you could, in my case, I'm using a keyboard. You can also connect an Xbox game controller if you wanted to do that. But all the different bindings of what you can do here are listed under keyboard and mouse bindings. I can look and see, well, if I wanted to rotate, like I show you, this is what you do, mouse right, hold, rotate, arrows, Q and E to rotate, and then if you want to exit rotation mode, you hit that. I use those a lot, and then we'll be using the ones on hand tracking to simulate hand tracking, and also the ones to be able to grab. So you can basically hit U, and that's going to allow you to grab objects. So I recommend you to look at that information. The other part that is really helpful if you guys are doing testing on this is connecting physical controllers. So this allows you to connect your physical controllers. Basically, once you hit install, it'll install an application on the Quest device that can communicate with Unity. And then you can calibrate and use the controllers in order for you to test the controllers and grabbing instead of having to use your keyboard. Other things in here is, logs. You can look at logs as well. Record and replay are pretty helpful for if you want to basically record a session and then just have these replay so you don't have to do the same inputs again. So that's that part. There's obviously a lot of information in here that I won't be able to cover, but that gives you an idea. Okay, so we have just an object and a camera rig. Let's go ahead and go and move forward and look at the building blocks. So I have a camera rig. I want to add controllers. I want to be able to render those. I'm going to go ahead and go into core. And if you don't want to go into core, you can just search and say, well, Dilmer, I want to know what's available for controllers. Well, I want to be able to grab objects. I want to be able to use to track the controllers, to be able to see them. So we can click on the plus symbol here. And then we can basically close out of that. And I'm going to go ahead and make this gizmo a little bit smaller here so we can see the objects. So there's a lot going on in here, and it's easy to think about this and say, oh yeah, that's just adding a building block. But This is going to support, if you are at this building block, it's going to render the controllers depending on the headset that you have. Right now, if you have a Quest 2 or if you have a Quest 3, a Quest 3S, I think also Quest Pro is added in here. You can see some of the models. And then the mappings also happen here. Right now, this is basically mapped to the L touch, which is going to be the left controller. And then you can also look in here at the right touch, which is going to be the right controller. The other cool thing is this depends on a camera rig. So if you didn't want to do what I did at the beginning and just don't add a camera rig, you can just drag and drop the controllers. And because it has a dependency on this, it's going to add that automatically for you. So that should be good. So now, okay, Dilmer, how do I test it? I added controllers. Well, now we can just go ahead and hit play. And we can make sure that there is rendering controllers. Now I should be able to look at controllers and all the inputs. And you can see that when that happens, that means that it's compiling the shaders for URP. So just don't panic. If it's a magenta color, then that's a different issue. It has a different, it's probably referencing the ROM pipeline, rendering pipeline on the material. Okay, so now we can go ahead and look around and we have controllers. So what I want to show you here, if I want to move the right controller or the left controller, I can use the left bracket or right bracket. So right now you can see that the headset, it's the one that is selected. I'm going to go ahead and go down. I'm going to use the right bracket in here. And what I want to show you is I can also use my mouse to move it around. But what I want to show you is if I were to press U, you can see the grip button is also getting simulated, right? And that's actually going to execute an action in Unity. So it's not just rendering, it's actually going through the APIs, executing those inputs. So if you need to test, maybe you want to shoot a ball and you want to bind to that action, you basically add a listener to that, and then you'll be able to, to capture that. So I can also look at the other buttons in here and then Y. So that gives you an idea that you can also, simulate the controllers, CM, capture the. If you were also using hands, which in this case, I don't have hand tracking added just yet, but if we had it, you can also change that from controllers to hands. Okay, so that's cool. Can we actually see these on the actual headset, right? Like, can we test it? So that's the part of the, so right now, if you're using macOS, if you're using PC, so for PC, you get something called Meta Link, and that's going to be this guy right here, which you can also download from, if you search Meta Link download, it's going to take you to the right location. And this is going to only work for PC, unfortunately, right now. But for macOS, we support the XRSIM. So depending on what computer you have, you can, so if you have a PC, you're going to be able to do what I'm about to show you. So if you go ahead and uncheck this, now what that's going to tell the system is, well, I don't want to simulate that on the actual simulator I'm going to be running on MetaLink. So what I recommend you to do, just to make sure that things are working, is go into build profiles. And right now I have my headset connected to the device. But notice one thing that we haven't done is we need to make sure that we change the actual build profile to be MetaQuest. So right now we're in Windows. So let's go ahead and change this to MetaQuest. And again, this is very important because if you want to target MetaQuest development, you want to deploy to a headset, that's going to be the target platform that you need to switch to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on switch platform. And it looks like there's a couple of questions. So Jaden, if I run, maybe we'll leave 15 minutes at the end. So just keep me on track there, just to make sure we have time to answer the questions. But so what is this doing right now? It's basically re-importing all the assets, is recompiling everything, because whenever you change the platform, there are in Unity, there's something called compiler flags. And what those do is there's different logic that you can execute depending on the platform. So this is going to change everything to be MetaQuest. So there's different compression associated with that. There's different compiler options, Android versions, quality settings, graphics that need to be set based on the platform. So we're going to make sure that we have the right one. Okay, so looks like that is running. So I told you, okay, well, that is running. I'm going to go back in here, and then I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to go ahead and connect. So just make sure that you get so if you have a PC, well, regardless, if you have Mac OS or PC, you're gonna need a Meta-Link cable, and this is gonna be a USB-C cable. In my case, I'm using the official one that Meta provides, but there's other ones in Amazon that you guys can also get. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put it on, and I'm gonna go ahead and cast so you guys can see what I'm seeing as well. And I have the USB-C cable connected to my computer right now. Let me make sure that that's plugged in. So I'm assuming that you guys already set the headset to be in developer mode, so that way we are gonna be able to deploy to it and also run Meta-Link. Okay, so now what I can do with this tool is I can go ahead and say, okay, let's go ahead and cast. And I'm doing everything live, so hopefully everything works. But okay, cool. Yeah, so we have hand tracking working, which is really cool. And I mean, this is on the native, on the OS, but if I pick up my controllers are now rendering okay. I can also see hands. So I know that the headset it's working just fine. So what I'm gonna do though on the headset is I'm gonna go into my menu, and if I go into, so there's something called link, and link is basically what we're gonna need to run in Unity and test our experience without having to deploy. So again, this is gonna be PC only. There's also AirLink, and I tried in the past, it's not as reliable, so I recommend just using the cable, the USB-C cable. And now we're gonna go ahead and launch this, and I believe it's already, okay, so it looks like it's already running. So let's go ahead and go back. And okay, so now if I go back into Unity, one thing that I'll have you check is click on refresh on run on device, and just make sure that your Oculus Quest 3 it's showing. And you can, at this point, you could build and then deploy. So in this case, you can say, well, I want to put my builds into, normally this is going to be either through a pipeline. If you're working for a company, there's a deployment process. But if it's just you on your computer, you can create a folder somewhere and then just name your APK. It's going to be my hello world. And then you can just hit save, and it's going to compile. It's going to push to the device. In my case, I don't want to do that because I'm going to be using Meta-Link. So we have our scene added here. We have everything looks good. So now I'm going to go ahead and test it on Meta-Link. I have Meta-Link running, and I know that because the Meta-Link app is up and running. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. And if everything runs, it should launch. Yep, this doesn't work every time, but it's working. So this is cool. Okay, so now I can see the Meta logo. So that means that the experience is currently launching. So it's launching Meta-Link, and let me see until Unity open. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see, yeah, you can see that there's a loading icon on the experience. And then if I go back into Unity, looks like, oh yeah, it's actually running. There we go. Yeah, so you can see that we're now running natively in Unity. And let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and pull my cast. So the window on the right is going to be the cast. The window on the left is the Unity game view rendering what I'm seeing. So controllers work. I mean, we haven't really added any interactions, but you guys can see that I can look around. We have our camera rig. We have our controllers. You can see the buttons that are changing. Any input is working correctly. So we know we have a virtual reality application that is currently running. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. And close, and also this. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take this off, and then I can keep explaining. All right, so now if we go back into building blocks, what I'm gonna do though is I wanna be able to grab, I'm gonna do something very simple. I'm gonna be able to grab that object, and then maybe we'll just move that around. Just gonna go ahead and duplicate it. And then maybe we can just put it. We also have a mug, because I don't, yeah, let's go ahead and grab this mug. And then, yeah, I think this one is really cool because this one is going to show you the power of using hand tracking. And there are objects that are already added automatically. And in this case, I'm using if you go to samples, objects as part of the Meta XR Interaction SDK Essentials, you're going to see a lot of different objects in here that are showcased in some of the different sample scenes. But in this case, I'm just going to drag and drop some of these components. And the cool thing about this object, though, is already has grabbable components, which you're going to need to be able to grab an object with your controllers or with hands. But it also has the actual custom hand poses that you can basically set up on an object. So in this case, you can see that I can go in and look at all these different hands. They are called poses, hand grab poses. And this is already defined for you because this is a prefab that I just added. But you can see that I can go in here and say, I don't know that we have time to go through and set up one by default, but I'll share some links so you guys can learn this. But it gives you the idea once you create a pose, you can create multiple of them and then just change the different joints to be able to map exactly how you want your objects to look like when your hands to look like when you grab an object. You can also look at the mirror versions of that. And in fact, if you go in here, you can see that it has these create mirror options. Okay, so we have this object in here. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it maybe right over here. And then for the guitar, I'm gonna go ahead and use a building block and I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna search for grab and I'm gonna say, you know what, I wanna add grab interactions. And let's go ahead and add grab interactions. And then if we go back into your camera rig, right now we still have only controllers only, right? And that's because we haven't really added hand tracking. So if you go to core and then look at hand tracking and click on the plus symbol, now you're gonna see that, well, not only we have the controllers, the meshes, for each one of the controller models, but we also have hands that are gonna be rendering a mesh. And you can also control a lot of these. If you wanted to show outlines, you can also look at some of the options available for that. And in fact, if I were to look at some of those options, you guys can look at some of those details. But okay, so we have hands. Go back to camera rig, and you're gonna see here that we have controllers and hands. And we didn't have to do that manually, right? I just drag and drop some of those components, and the settings were automatically set. Another thing that I recommend you guys look at the project setup tool as you're making changes, because depending on what you're developing or what you're adding, it's gonna give you new recommendations. And if you don't do some of these, your game might not be optimized. So in this case, using HDR causes problems with performance. So that's gonna go into your rendering pipeline settings and then make sure that that is disabled, which normally you would have to go to settings here, and then you will have to look at the actual assets, and then you see how HDR is enabled. So project setup tool is gonna go through that and change it automatically for you. So we'll do that here and say, yep, go ahead and apply it. And then if I go to standalone, we can go ahead and apply it. So now, how do we test it, right? So let's go ahead and test this I'm gonna test it through MetaLink. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back here and then make sure that I'm casting. And I'll just let that run. Okay, so now that's looking at me, which is sitting on the table. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. Let's put my headset on. And I think I need to reset the view because okay, there we go. So now we have like different objects in the scene, and I have controllers. So now if I were to drop controllers and I look at my hands, it should take a second here to be able to show hands. Just move, and there we go. So now we can see hands as well running. Let's see if I can grab this object. So remember that I show you the different hand poses, and that is really cool because depending on where you grab it, if I grab the mug in this area, we know that hand pose is the one that got determined. And there's an algorithm behind the scenes that handles that you don't have to worry about. But we know that we can grab these objects. Let me see if I can grab the guitar, right? Did I? Oh, there we go, I can. It's under my desk, but this one doesn't look realistic, right? We don't have hand poses associated, and that's where you can start adding some of those to your different components that have grab interactions. And then I don't think this one I didn't make grabbable, so I can't really add that. The cool thing with this though is now I can go back to controllers. Let me go make sure. Okay, let me see, make sure that I can. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now I can go back to controllers. The system automatically swap them. I can still interact with the objects. This one I cannot grab because I didn't add a grab interactable there. And this one only supports hands, so that's why I cannot grab that component. So it looks like we are good to go. And okay, Dilmer, that's cool. So what if I wanted to test that quickly also on the XR simulator? So, I mean, same process. You guys are gonna go here. I'm actually gonna do two things just to keep this a little more exciting. We are gonna go into Meta XR tools, and I'm gonna go into Immersive Debugger. And I want to show you how Immersive Debugger runs, because this is going to be very helpful for you guys during development. And I'm going to say, you know what, I want to show inspectors, I want to show the console, and I want to show logs. And the distance, close, far, I think default, it's fine. I think it's closed by default. And then I think you can look at all the other options, but let's just do that on MetaLink one more time, because I want to show you that. I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything here. And then let's go ahead and hit play. I'm going to have this on the right side and wait for this to load. Let's go ahead and put the headset on. And we can see that we have our loading on the top left side of the Unity application. And this is the reason why sometimes running on Immersive Debug on Meta XR Sim is faster. Because right now this is faster than deploying to a device, but it still takes time for us to be able to push it. So sometimes you may want to test with Meta XR Sim, just take something quick, and then you can go back and forth into your MetaLink if you have a PC where you're doing that. And let me see if this is running. And looks like it is running. Okay. And we don't see anything just yet. And if you guys are XR developers, you know exactly what the MetaLink sometimes has issues with connecting to it or crashing. So it looks like we have an issue there. Okay, so I think it's going to crash. I guarantee you that it's going to crash. So this is a live demo with developers, so you know what I'm going through. So I'm going to go ahead and kill Unity. And I'm going to go ahead and, nope, that's not the project. Go back and project from the disk. So if that happens, this is exactly what you need to do. And then I think this is the one that I just created. And then open it. And then we're just going to go ahead and reopen it. And it looks like somebody's saying that Unity is paused. Yep. This is something that I just learned. Unity wasn't doing this before. And it's really cool that it's putting, if something happens, it puts basically a backup in this directory. So I thought that was pretty handy, because sometimes it used to be that it crashed and then you will lose your changes. If you have source control and you're pretty careful with that, you won't. But this was cool because I noticed that this morning I crashed and it allowed me to get all the different changes back. Okay, let's see how are we doing with time. I think we have 30 more minutes. Jaran, is that correct? All right, so then we're casting right now. And I think we're good to go. So let me make sure that my Immersive Debugger, Immersive Debugger is enabled. And then, okay, let's go ahead and hit play and see if things look good. And I'm gonna go ahead and go back to here. Okay, looks like this is working now. And there it worked. Okay, awesome. And make sure that I have, so what you're seeing right now, it's Immersive Debugger. And again, this is the log information that we just enable. You can actually go here and say, you know what, I don't want to show the console. I want to see the console. What different settings? So when I was talking to you about inspectors and logs, and this is exactly what I was referring to. Let me see if I can, okay, there we go. So I can see the left controller anchor. Let me see if I can select that. And you can see that this shows you if for whatever reason you have issues with your left controller not showing, and you want to make sure that your game is also tracking it. This is how you can use that. If I change to hands, you can also change those. This is also really cool if you want to see a pass-through enable. If you wanted to do, I need to make some changes to be able to enable pass-through. I'll show you how to do that. And then, yeah, there's other settings in there as well. The other thing that I want to show you, though, that is pretty cool is as your games get more complex, this is something that is very, very helpful. Let's say that you want to see a runtime, like what's happening with your game objects. So I added a mug, right? And I want to know, like, where is the mug? Like, what does it have a rigid body? Is there a gravel component associated with that? So this gives you access to the inspector, right, at runtime, which is pretty pretty helpful. I can also toggle some of these different options, and these won't move if I move my head. This also changes the style. I can also get it to move with my head. That way I can maybe position it away from my game. And then I'll just put it right there. But yeah, that's basically Immersive Debugger. And there's a lot of features with this. You can basically create custom inspectors if you wanted to do that on a custom object. And the way that you do that, just show you very quickly, is you can add what's immersive. Oh, it's actually debug inspector. And let's say that you had a custom script and you wanted to expose that information. So let me go ahead and show you this. I'm going to go ahead and create a quick folder, and I'm going to say scripts. And this is going to be a very simple test. I won't go into too much coding, but this is going to be testing Meta Inspector. And this is where this comes really handy if you're working with designers. And let's say that a designer wants to see some of the information that you have in your implementation. Well, normally they have to create UI for it and bind it, and there's like this handshake that has to happen. That takes a lot of time. So without that, then you can add the features that I'm going to show you, and you can expose that information as a designer without having to have the developer help you with the bindings. So let's say that I'm going to add on this mock, I'm going to go ahead and add let's say testing Meta Inspector script. And doesn't have anything right now, but I'm going to show you. And then I'm also going to say debug inspector. And this is going to be a Devpost demo inspector, right? Right now, it has basically the transforms, the rigid body, and you can go in here and say, you know what, I want to expose, for this one, I want to expose the position of the mug, and you need to enable it, and then the position of the mug, I also want to expose maybe the angle, the rotation, and maybe on this position, I want to set it to red. So you can also change the colors of those as you get more complex. And then this one is going to be, I don't know, cool options. And then category cool options. And then I think I'll just expose those two. But where this comes in handy, though, is when you have custom code, right? Like you have methods, you have private variables, different implementation that you want to expose. So what I'll do is I'll double click here to open I'm using Writer. You can use Code or Visual Studio. It just really depends on what you prefer. And then we'll open up here the code. Wait until it opens. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, normally a lot of times you're going to have variables that are not going to be exposed, right? Like you're going to have, maybe in this case, we can say this is going to be float. And let's say this was the mug speed or fall speed. For now, I'm just going to hard code it because I want to keep it simple. And then maybe you have something else here. Maybe you have a vector3 private, and then this is vector3, and then this is going to be the mock position relative to the guitar. And then this one will just hard code it. We'll just say it's going to be 1 meter away, 2 on the height, and 3 away from the camera. Okay, so very simple. There's really nothing complicated in here. So now if I go back into my code and I let this recompile, you're going to see that I also have, in this case, I have the testing Meta Inspector, which is a custom script. So I'm going to go ahead and enable it. And you're like, Don, why do I need that, right? Like, why? Well, this is private, right? This is not exposed. There's no UI, anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know what? Me as a designer, or somebody that is not a coder in your team want to expose that so that I know what you're doing with your code or there's something specific about it, right, that they might want to know. And then this one I'm going to say private expose var variables, something like that. And then I'm just going to change into, I don't know, these are maybe maybe I'll just make it green, and then, sure, green. Okay, and then display name, I think we can just leave it default. All right, so let's go ahead and run this, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. So this is where this comes in handy, is you can expose private implementation. You can also bind these to methods. If you had a routine that you wanted to execute through the inspector, the debug inspector, you can also do that. So if I go ahead and go in here and then rotate my head a little bit so we can see it in front of me. So now you can see I have Meta XR. These are the core components that get exposed. We also have a new inspector called Cool Options. Remember, this was the transform that we exposed. This was already added if I were to go here, but these are things that maybe I just care about. I don't want to see everything else. I can see the position of the mug. I can see the rotation of the mug. And then those will change if I were to grab the mug. And then the other thing that is cool, though, is I also see private exposed variables in here. And this is a slider, right? Like if this was mapped to maybe an object, you wanted to change the speed of your car, then you can go in here, change it, and then see it in real time. And then I can also see the vector tree is rendering correctly. You can also click on this, and it will show you an anchor depending on where that is in the scene view. So that is very, very helpful, and that will allow you not to have to create custom logs, which is something that I've done quite a bit in the past. So you can use immersive debugger to do that. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you before I think we have 3 more minutes before question, is I want to show you Passthrough, right? Like if you want to create a mixed reality application, what do you need to do? And this is going to be pretty quick, but I'm going to go into building blocks. And we talk about VR, and we talk about some of the core building blocks. So you can go into mixed reality. And if you wanted to create a mixed reality application, then you will start here. And then you should add just the Passthrough building block, because that has a dependency on the camera rig. So I'm going to go ahead and click on plus. And then now if you look at this, you're going to see it has a dependency of that. Passthrough, it's been, basically that component is being added so that we can see the real world. And there's different changes in here that you can change depending on Passthrough. You can change the color of the edges in Passthrough. It gives you some really cool looks on the Passthrough. And then, well, we added that, but remember, let's go to the project setup tool. And then this is where, like, if you don't do this, it's not going to show Passthrough correctly. HDR needs to be disabled in order for Passthrough to work correctly. And there's also some recommendations here for Passthrough to work. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And then I think we're good to go. And then what I'm going to do for this one, I'm actually going to use let's use MetaLink. Let's just hope that it works this time. I think it's going to work. And then let's go in here. And then, yep, we got Passthrough working. And maybe what I'll do is, okay, actually, this is really cool. So we have Immersive Debugger, and then we can see like some of the options here that were added to the inspector for Passthrough. If I wanted to change that, let's see if you guys can see that. Oh yeah, you can see that. See how it changes the opacity of Passthrough? You can change that. If I wanted to change that, I think some of these may not show correctly depending on the settings that you set, but you get the idea, right? Like if you don't want to, I think edge detection, oh, there we go. Edge detection is working. And then if I wanted to change maybe brightness, I think some of the colors you have to, let's see if I can set it, actually, set it to grayscale, color adjustment. Oh, that's cool. I can do it here. Okay, I just learned something new. But yeah, you can change the saturation. It's hard to see probably, but it is changing as I'm changing the look of Passthrough. So pretty powerful tools when it comes to, oh yeah, that looks cool. When it comes to Passthrough. And then, yeah, and the same thing with, lastly, I want to show you how that looks on the MRUK. And I'm going to add another building block, which I think it's going to be very helpful. It's going to be the effect mesh. And this is where mixed reality with XR becomes really powerful. So I added something called effect mesh, and that allows you to add colliders to the real world scene that gets created. There's also components to be able to find where the table is and different rules. If you wanted to place an object on top of a table or on the wall, then these type of tools will be very helpful. But I won't go into too much detail, but I want to show you how it looks. So if I go I think I have these enabled. And yep, Meta XR Simulator is enabled. So I'm actually going to disable Immersive Debugger on the simulator just so that I can show you better, because it's hard to manage with the XR Sim. So now I'm going to run an XR Simulator. It's a mixed reality experience versus doing a virtual reality experience. So I'm going to go ahead and hit plus symbol here. And you're like, whoa, there's a lot of cool stuff. It's like the Matrix. And it is. There's a lot of technology all wrapped in here. And what it's doing, it's the effect mesh is creating colliders and adding shaders to be able to get the bounds of each one of these objects. And this is helpful if you want to create a game that reacts to physics. So if you had a rigid body, a ball that you throw, and it falls with gravity, then it's going to bounce, right? Because there are colliders associated with these different objects. I think we need to enable colliders on the effect mesh in order for that to work, but look at that and you'll see exactly what I mean. But yeah, and then lastly, you can see that we have an environment. That is because we are in mixed reality, and this is creating a synthetic environment behind the scene. We also have other environments available. I believe some of those are under Meta. And then if I go to Meta XR Simulator, there is, I'm trying to remember where that is. Interaction, simulator, and I think that might be a different package. I'll have to get back to you guys on that. But there are different synthetic environments that you can enable. It used to be in this area. And I think I know why. Let me go back into, I'll just show you these guys and then we'll wrap it up with questions. So I think that's actually it might be part of the samples. If not, I can send you the documentation on it. Okay, so it looks like it's not part of the samples. Okay, I'll have to get back to you on where the synthetic environments are if you want to test different environments, but you also can create your own if you wanted to create JSON environments in JSON. Okay, this is gonna bug me, but yeah, I mean that's a wrap. I think lastly, what I want to show you guys is a couple of slides for the competition. So let me go ahead and pull that up, and then we can get into questions. All right, so we saw it on See It in Action. There was a lot of things that we covered. Lastly, I recommend you guys to join the Meta Horizon Star competition. We have, well, this specifically, it's going to be to join the program. So before you can join the competition, Meta has two different programs. For VR, it's going to be STAR, and then for Horizon Worlds, it's called MHCP. So for the competition, you'll need to join a STAR, and you're like, well, why would I want to do that? Well, it's really cool because you get access to a Discord where there's other developers in there that are working on games. There's also support from Meta. I'm there. There's a lot of people from product there. There's educational content. There's mentors that we are providing, including Valem. I'm sure many of you guys know Valem, and there's other really great mentors in there. And yeah, there's just a lot of help that you can get, technical support that you can get by joining the programs. I recommend you guys to basically scan that QR code and join, and that's going to be a prerequisite for the Meta Horizon Star competition. And then, yep, join the competition. There's a $1.5 million in prizes. This year is pretty cool because we have a lot of different categories for you to join. You can create a casual game, you can create a social game. You can also take advantage of some of these categories like Passthrough camera access, AI, Meta Spatial SDK, WebXR. You can also compete in those different, and then also Android development. And then, yeah, so go ahead and take a screenshot of these, scan the QR code. There's a lot of resources there as well. And then lastly, the Meta Horizon Creator Program. This is the other program that I mentioned, part of the Horizon Worlds. I recommend you guys to join this. It's very similar to STAR. You get access to events. There are a lot of opportunities. There's a community, a Discord. And yeah, go ahead and scan that. That will give you more information. And then I don't know that I have a slide for the actual competition. Well, if you scan this, it's actually going to take you to the competition, and you can learn more about that on Devpost. But yeah, that's everything. So I think Jaden, we're good for questions.
Thank you so much, Dilmer. Yeah, we can go ahead and take questions while I try to figure out what's going on with my audio. But yeah, so we're good on time. If you guys want, you could just throw your questions in the chat, and I'll also bump the URL specifically for the Meta Horizon Start Developer Competition. But yeah, let's look at questions. I see the first one that somebody had asked earlier is it only the latest headset that you can use to test the projects, or is there a way to test the project without the headset, which I think you actually covered?
Yeah, so you can, so you don't, the only time that you need a headset if you want to, well, first, if you have a PC, and then if you have a PC that supports MetaLink, which I can drop in the comments, then you should be able to test on the headset. You can use Quest 2, Quest 3, or Quest 3S to be able to test it. Then if you have a Mac OS computer, then you wouldn't be able to do what I did in Unity that sends it. In that case, I would recommend just download the Meta XR Sim, and then you can use Meta XR Sim for testing.
Nice. And then somebody was asking if there's a difference between the OpenXR and Oculus options in the XR plugin management window.
Yeah. There's it used to be that there was a big difference, but now I think we're in parity with what Oculus had. So I recommend using the OpenXR because we're basically making all of our changes in OpenXR and all the new capabilities. That's going to be going forward what we are going to be supporting more. The Oculus plugin is basically the old one that it's not recommended anymore. So yeah, I recommend you to use OpenXR. I did it about 6 months ago, and things are a lot more stable now. So just make sure that you're using OpenXR going forward.
Okay, nice. And then one more is so somebody saying OpenXR has its own camera rig called XR Origin. Meta plugin works through OpenXR. What method is preferred to create experiences? Meta camera rig or OpenXR XR Origin in the scene? And our
Yeah, I
functionality is interchangeable.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you're doing. I know like if you're using XR Toolkit with Era Foundation, they have like the XR Origin VR camera, and that's still supported. I think you guys can use that. And that it there are less features available for that. So if you use the Meta SDKs, there's a lot more features packed into that. The only thing with using Meta SDKs is it's just for Meta, right? Like it's the platform features that we provide are gonna be all in there. If you want to support other headsets and other devices, then I do recommend looking at the XR Origin, and then also some of the implementation that allows you to target multiple headsets.
Yeah, perfect. And then for some of the competition specific questions, you guys probably just best recommend checking out the Twitter, or feel free to shoot us a message here on Discord, and I can get like specific answers back to you guys. And just for anybody asking, yes, our recording will be made available sometime within the next probably just like early next week. But yeah, we will have a recording available. And then somebody's okay. No, okay,
Yeah,
no.
looks like we have a question on do these logs and consoles work in other devices other than Quest 3? And I believe they do. I think the immersive debugger should work across. The problem with that is if you have SDKs, DLs that are specifically to Meta, and then you bring in another set of DLs for a different device, you might encounter problems. So I haven't tested it. I imagine that it could work, but yeah, I would say test it and let me know. Send me a message. I'll be curious. I think it should work.
Nice. The pitch deck. Well, I mean, you didn't really said pitch deck, so maybe Albert, is that for the just like yes, we'll have like the screen share, or you're just asking for the competition information. I'll bump the competition information in Slack if that's helpful for. Sorry, not Slack, on Discord, if that's helpful for anyone. Also, you should have gotten it in your Devpost mail in your emails. Okay. But here's one more.
Oh, let's say, oh, okay. Can we use, let me just go ahead and maximize this.
Probably
Okay. Can we use
the link
WebXR?
let
Is
me
that
share your
the,
screen, by the way.
Oh, can we use WebXR? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you want to target WebXR, make sure that you're using immersive web SDK. So it's IW SDK, and if you go to the Star Competition resources and search for the IW SDK, you're gonna find information about it. That's a SDK that we recently released, and it has emulation features. So definitely, yes, we can use it. And then look at the rules and information will require that you provide a link of your WebXR experience once you get an experience up and running. So yeah, long answer, yes, we support WebXR for the competition.
Nice. And then we do have like 3 more minutes. If anybody else has any additional questions that they'd like to ask, like feel free to throw that in here.
I see a question. I already started another engine, Gota, for VR. Is this allowed? Yeah, it is. Definitely is allowed. There was a question. I think if you go to the FAQ on the Star competition, where we answer those questions. So not only Godot, we also support Unreal. We also support. There's really no constraints on what a game engine. As long as it falls under the categories that we're looking for the competition. Yeah. So what are other benefits for a Meta Star program apart from the hackathons? This is mainly, honestly, it's community. There's a lot of developers in there that are working on large and really cool games. So if you're building a game and you have questions on different areas, I think that's a great way to get those answers. So I think you're gonna find there's a lot of different communities in XR, and some of the communities are pretty dead, but the Star Discord is pretty alive, and yeah, you'll be able to get answers, technical questions. We have a lot of experts in the Star. There's also events that we might organize, and we might invite you as well to join. Like as you guys get closer to building your title and shipping, there are different programs around that and support. So yeah, definitely, it's not just hackathons. It's more like support community and getting more involved in the community for VR as it relates to Meta.
Okay, so I'll do this as the last one because I know you guys recently had some changes to the pass through stuff. But somebody asked on the camera pass through API, can you quickly cover the changes on that? You said they tried to build something last year that would utilize it. It wasn't an option.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on that one, we're gonna have a workshop coming up on. I can actually go ahead and share it here. Let me just share. Okay, so I think you're sharing. So, oh yeah, I'm
Oh,
sharing.
no, no,
Let me go
you're
into
sharing it. I
that.
was telling you earlier that. Thanks.
Let me, yeah. So if you go, so I recommend you to look at webinars and then office hours. And then if you look at the one that is happening on the 17th, this is where Roberto Coviello and myself are going to go through the migration path. If you build something with pass-through camera access in the past by using the non-MRUK version, now it is part of MRUK, and there's some changes in there and also improvements. So we're going to be talking about some of those changes and what the migration is, and also improvements were. So one of them, it used to be that you can only get one camera at a time. Now you can do concurrent access to both cameras. Intrinsics were expanded, and there's other information in there that you can now get. So yeah, make sure that you join that. And Roberto is amazing. He has a lot of knowledge about PCA.
Well, Dilbert, thank you so much for making the time on this call today. It was a really informational session. I'm really excited to share this out with the rest of the community. And obviously, thank you so much to everybody for sticking with us through the technical difficulties and everything else. So really appreciate you guys being here. Um, as always, head over to Devpost. As you can see, it's like stacked with more competitions that you can be a part of. And obviously, we'll keep having more of these sessions right here on Discord. So thank you guys so much again. I'm Jadon. I'm always here on Discord. If you need me or if you have any more questions or concerns, do feel free to reach out to us. Enjoy the rest of your day and have an amazing weekend, everyone.
Thank you, guys.